Handle Your High with Tadayoshi. And here we're back with Handle Your High with me, Tadayoshi. And thank you so much, Jim Riley, for being a guest on the show. You and I have never actually formally met, so it's wonderful to actually see your face and to be able to meet you in person. I heard really great things about you from David Meltzer, who introduced us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Dave. He's introduced me to a lot of interesting people, and I appreciate being on your show, so thank you.
Oh, yeah, you are welcome. So you come from, I think it's Upland. You're in Upland, California, right?
I am. I've been an Orange County guy most of my life, probably 35 years of my life, and I just recently moved back to Upland, California.
Okay, cool. Well, I was born in Inglewood. I didn't grow up when I was a kid in Southern California, but later on I would move and live in Temecula, and all the guys that say I don't know if you still do the racing. You're off-road racing, right?
Yeah, I'm phasing out of off-road racing, and I do a whole bunch of Spartan endurance racing.
Oh wow! Well, I saw a couple of the off-road stuff look pretty cool. I don't know, I'm the trucks and stuff look pretty cool. But
yeah.
And the reason why I mentioned that is because I had a lot of friends who in the Temecula area where I lived. There are all these BMX guys. There's racers, these off-road motocross guys. I guess the dirt is really good there. Do you know?
The land was cheap at one point, and it wasn't like you were in the inner city, so you could run around in the open land with your dirt bikes and your race cars. Of course, it's so built out now, it's not as much as it used to be.
Oh,
yeah.
I even got a chance to meet years ago when I was up there, Jeremy McGrath, and I watched him on I think it was the Honda tracks they have out there.
Yep.
And man, this dude, they really put some money into those bikes, man. I had no idea you can get those motocross bikes up to like 80, 90 grand just to race. And more.
They put a lot of money into them, and they make a lot of money, especially McGrath. I think he was on Kawasaki, but
that's what it was.
A whole contingency of dirt bikers out there, and there's still a number of them out there because they had the property from way back when.
So did you? So the kind of racing you did, you guys didn't. They didn't have meets where you had both off-road stuff, and I'm just curious. I never attended any of the events.
Yeah, well, the off-road series that I race in, both Best in Desert and then Score International in Mexico, they have a variety of classes at the race course. So if you're racing in Mexico with Score International, they have bikes race early in the morning, and they'll put them off about 4 hours before the vehicles go off, and then the vehicles start going off, right? Whereas in Best in the Desert, they run us different days. And the reason why both is because the trucks are so fast that we will eventually catch up to the dirt bikes.
Is that right?
And there's nothing like a 6,000 pound, 900 horsepower race truck coming down your back, dirt bike that weighs 300 pounds, right? So,
that's immense, man. That's awesome stuff.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in doing all the racing stuff, and how long have you been doing it?
Well, I've been doing it for 12 years, and I got involved from actually the first guy I met in off-road racing. His name is Cameron Steele. He's a celebrity racer, been doing it his whole entire life. I said, hey, Cameron, I saw this really cool movie called Dust to Glory. How do I do that? And he's like, well, come on down to Mexico and hang out with us. Everybody's welcome. And I was hooked from day one, and I still blame him for all the money spent in off-road racing.
So when you do one of that kind of racing, it's several hours. Is that what it is? Explain to me how it works.
Yeah, it's all based on how many miles you're going to run. So the Baja 1000, and again, there's different classes. So the year that I won in my class, which was a 4-cylinder truck, like a spec truck, it took us 20 hours and 30 minutes to race the 1,000-mile race.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took a long time, and it was me and two other drivers, Rick Johnson and Lewis Chamberlain. The three of us did driving duties all the way down, and we won our class, the Baja 1000. But there's other shorter races. There's 400-mile races that might take 8 or 9 hours. You're not going to get off light, though. Let me just put it that way. It's not going to be an hour and done.
So I'm curious, you must have to be in, now this may be showing my ignorance, but you must, and it's ironic because I train lots of professional athletes, but in the fitness arena, I imagine you have to be in pretty decent shape to run these races.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up because in the past, everybody was, and I'm going to put this as delicately as possible, they were all kind of overweight, big guys, right? And they're in race cars that are capable of doing speeds of over 120 miles an hour, and you're spending a lot of time in the vehicle. Health is an important factor. And about the time I started getting really good, I thought, I want to be really healthy. And I've always had some form of higher tier athleticism, as part of my routine, as well as a decent diet. And I've always been either right at the weight I should be or a little bit less. So it was never really a huge factor for me, but I really did drill into my training as I got better in the race car, and it improved, not only my own personal endurance, but, just your brain power and your ability to stay focused because I was healthier and I'd done a lot of training. So nowadays people are smarter, right? you see all these, the dirt bikers, the skateboarders, the BMX guys, they all have these stringent workout and diet programs.
Yeah.
And
I've worked with some of those guys, and they're the first ones to come. They definitely they know the value.
They know the value, and it prevents injuries too.
Yeah, totally.
And what's interesting, what I started doing is I would pick random goals of things to go do that would require physical fitness, like I'm going to go climb Mount Whitney and Mount Rainier and do all these crazy things. And people are like, well, why are you doing it? I'm like, because I know it's going to force me to work out, so I'm better in the truck.
That's good. Now, so when you race in those enduro races, it's like 20 hours or whatever, how many hours you're racing, all you guys are in the truck, all three of you guys, or two of you guys, or whoever many is on your team?
The truck has two people, so you've got a driver and a navigator.
Okay.
And we'll run however we predetermined miles that we were going to run, together, and then we get out, and you put the next driver and his navigator in, because you got to have a level of comfort with your navigator too, because you're putting your life on the line. Really, as a driver, your gas, brake, and steering, and your navigator's the guy that's going to go, you got a hard left turn coming up here, right? So if I'm doing 110 miles an hour and I got a hard left, I better bring it down a little bit.
Right.
my life is literally in his hands, because most of the time, the outside of that turn is a cliff.
Oh, geez. So it's his job. So it's the navigator's job to study the landscape and to make sure that he understands or she understands what you guys are going to traverse.
Exactly. Knowing the course, knowing how to read the desert terrain, knowing what's on the GPS unit, and then just using some good common sense about, looking out beyond the windshield and seeing what's out there, right? And even like water flow patterns, if you're racing at the bottom of a mountain and you see water flow patterns, you can almost assume that water's going to cross the racetrack at some point, right? And you might have a crevasse that you got to go through, or rocks, or something that could be dangerous if you hit it at 80 or 90 miles an hour.
Wow. How long does it take a person to become proficient at that kind of racing?
Well, that's a really good question, because what I love about our sport is that anybody can do it. Okay, so if you have a pickup truck at home, there's probably a class for you to bring it out to the desert and race. So to answer your question, it doesn't take any time at all. You just can come do it. And that's what I love about the sport, that it's got a low cost of entry, if you can meet the specs, with a roll cage and all those different things. But to do it well and do it at a professional level, it should take several years to get up to that. And the reason why I say that is I rode with Cameron Steele in his navigator seat for 2 years before I even touched the wheel.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we raced a full series both years and lots of practice and desert runs so that I could learn how to do it before I even got behind the wheel, because I knew I wanted to understand it from a passenger seat before I got into the driver's seat.
So do you think being a navigator, if you will, of somebody, a good racer like that, really helped amplify your skills when you made the transition to being in the driver's seat?
Yeah, absolutely. I raced 3 races by myself. I just did okay, and then I partnered up with another team and improved. And the following year, we won the championship.
Oh, wow.
So to go from being a navigator, having a couple okay races, like learning my own vehicle and finding a good partner, which was Rick Johnson, we went and won the championship two years in a row. So it worked out pretty good for me.
Well, now in my industry, in this fitness and bodybuilding industry, when it comes to competition, a lot of people kind of argue that genetics plays a big role. And obviously, because it's a sport of structure and aesthetics and some of that stuff you just don't, you are born with, and you just amplify with your training and your diet process. is it kind of like that for this sport? Like, how much of this is vehicle, like a guy that could spend a lot of money on his vehicle, or how much of this is like talent, like a guy who's got a great navigator and he's on par, they know each other's skill sets and they work well together and they can crush people out there in the desert. Like, how much of it is that skill level? How much of it is like, this guy's got more resources and he's just going to have a head advantage over other people?
Yeah, well, because like I mentioned, there's a lot of classes in racing, right? So there's, imagine there's the garage guy. He's built something in his garage and he goes out and races it. He might be in a lower class, and in that case, it's about his skill and ability to keep his own equipment together. I mean, the desert is hard on your vehicles, so he's got to be smart, right? Like, hey, if I run over that rock, I'm going to break something, right? So he's got to miss the rock. I say that sarcastically too, by the way, but so you've got that. But then as you move your way through the classes and you get into the guys that are investing, $1 million, $2 million. There's teams out there that are putting $5 to $10 million out in the field. Now you can kind of out money people because you've got better pit services, more efficiencies, you've got more spare tools and spare parts. So as you work your way through the ranks, there's different levels of success. But I will tell you that it takes a lot of inherent desert knowledge to be a driver and to be able to read terrain and to be frank with you, to have the balls to push the gas pedal and go.
That sounds like it would be the hardest part, like, because you're used to driving on the road for most of us,
Yeah.
And you just have different perceptual cues that tell you to slow down and tell you to speed up or tell you to turn or whatever. And when you're going really fast, my biological father was a race car driver, but he did drag car and funny car. Yeah. And he was a great driver, from what I understand. But I guess you just don't, if you're running a track, let's say a circular track like a NASCAR track, you just don't have, you have different cues you have to use. You can't turn when you think you're going to turn. You have to turn ahead of time. You got to calculate speed, all these kinds of things. Like, I suppose it's kind of the same there in the desert, I imagine. Yeah,
it's very much the same. And the taxation on your mental strength is incredible because, unlike a circle track, and trust me, it's very difficult to run a NASCAR around a circle track. There's nothing against what they're doing because the track does have different conditions as the race goes on. It gets hotter and you've got your tire temperature and all those things. But in the desert, you're not running over the same terrain twice.
Right.
every corner is different, right? And every twist and every long road is different. And even throughout the day, that changes. So maybe your buddy drove through it 10 minutes ago, but everybody between you and him kicked up rocks. Now all of a sudden I'm avoiding rocks, or creating little pit holes and things like that. So you're constantly on fire in the brain to look at your surroundings and accommodate for what you're seeing too. So it's mentally taxing.
So when you get done with a race like that, I imagine you just like crash out for like a weekend.
Well, yeah, true story. But what's interesting, because we're talking about physical fitness here too, is when I wasn't physically strong and in a very strict regimented course designed just for what I did as a driver, I would come home and I would be done for a week. I mean, my wife would tell me like, "Oh yeah, you're exhausted for a week." After I increased my strength and training, I would come home from a race and the very next day I'd be fine. Oh. Because I improved my diet. Hydration actually has a ton.
I was going to ask you, yeah.
That's car, yeah. I use a product that's called GQ6.
GQ.
GQ.
Is that a Gatorade product?
No. It's GQ-6. It's designed really for cyclists. And the owner, I met him. He actually leased a building that I was in, and I got to know him. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I make a hydration mix." I'm like, "Really?" I said, "That probably helped me in the race car." Yeah, and he goes, "Oh, for sure." I've been on it for 5 years every day, and it really has not only improved my racing and not getting dehydrated, but it's just made me healthier overall because I see you're drinking water, right? Just that consciousness to be healthy. And so anyways, the product's been phenomenal for me. That's really one of my only supplements I've taken the last 5 years as a hydration supplement, because as you know, water's so important to your overall health.
I know that I knew that on the tracks, like on the NASCAR tracks and stuff like that, and especially the Indy and Enduro tracks, the ones that are really long, where they're racing for hours and hours, that these guys lose pounds of water. Like they got these fire suits on and they're sweating, and it's like, and it's a lot of, it's people. I don't think most people realize who've never been in a race car like that, the forces that pull on you as you make these, as you're making turns, as you're doing, it's really, really taxing to do that for 20 hours.
Yeah.
Is like, okay, that's like more than a workout.
Yeah. We're in the same environment. We have airflow into our helmets, and we do have suits on everything. We use hydration packs, so you've got your water tube in the vehicle. But I've also ran into a situation where I had a guy get dehydrated in my navigation seat, and we're in the middle of the desert, and he's going, and I'm like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know," and he's head's bobbing and everything. He was out, and fortunately, I was only a few minutes from a pit. It took 3 guys to pull him out of the car.
Oh, jeez.
And by the way, he was a paramedic, and the guys that pulled him out were paramedics. We got a new guy in the car, and I took off, and I kept checking back on the radio, like, "Hey, how's he doing? How's Matt?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're getting him there." Took him over 45 minutes to get him hydrated with an IV in a cool area. It's not to be messed around with. I mean, hydration is so important.
When you're out there in the desert, like in Baja, what's the temperature like when you're racing?
Anywhere from 118, 100 degrees, but down to 50 if you're going over a mountain pass, or maybe you come over a mountain range and then you come down into the Pacific or the Sea of Cortez side and there's fog. All of a sudden the temperature drops. And then if you're racing through the night and you're along the coastline, you can get easily in the mid-40s.
Oh, wow. So you get this range.
All the time.
I just have, as you describe this, I just have to bet that you just have to hit some just beautiful landscapes as you're racing, like you just can't see other places.
There's nothing like it. And the unfortunate thing for me is most of my life I've only raced Baja in the dirt at a race pace, and I haven't had the chance to enjoy it from a vacationing standpoint. Let me tell you, the places I've passed doing 100 miles an hour, I thought, man, I want to go back.
I want to slow down.
I want to slow down. Well, when I was young, I was a surfer, and there's a place called Scorpion Bay on the Pacific side, and it's about, 25, 30 hours south. I've driven by it at least 20 times in a race car and have never surfed it, and it's a lifelong dream, right? So I've watched it 20 times. Not going to do it this time. And some guys have the luxury of what we call pre-running, and that's the race course opens up several weeks before the race, and you can go down and drive a recreational vehicle and see what the course looks like. But I've got a full-time job, so
you're right, exactly.
Go down there and play around in the desert for 2 weeks learning the course. So I only see it on race day, unfortunately.
I just think it would be. I'm just imagining that you have just probably seen some unbelievable sunsets, some really wonderful landscapes. The desert. I grew up in Las Vegas. Even though I was born in Southern California, we moved. And I grew up in Vegas, and I like the desert. I absolutely love the desert. I love the way it looks. I love the way it feels. I like hot weather. I must have come from, in another life, I must have been like some desert person. I don't know.
Well, listen, man, there's a number of people like you. I'm one of them, too. I love the desert. I love desert rain. We raced from Vegas to Reno in the Best in Desert Series, so you want to talk about some beautiful terrain up in the U.S., to do that run and see, and that's another one. We'll start in Vegas, and it'll be 110 degrees because the race is in August. By the time we get close to Reno, we're running over Sierras now in the pine nut forest, and I've seen snow up there. So from hot desert heat to snow in one race, it's pretty bizarre.
Now, is that the navigator's job to keep track of that shit? It's like, hey man, we need shorts in the first part of the race, and we need a tank top in the last one.
Dude, there's just a point where you got to have some grit, whether it's too hot or too cold. You got to suffer through it.
What about sleep? Is it if you're racing those long hours, you take breaks often? It sounds like, or you just suffer through it.
You want to be smart, right? Because you're in a loaded weapon, and that vehicle is a loaded weapon. So you don't want to over push yourself, and you're running on sleep deprivation. There's a lot of guys that they Ironman it by themselves, and I don't agree with doing that on some of these bigger, longer races, because how physically strong can you be after 10, 15 hours at that speed, right? But I'll usually trade off with somebody else on a long race and get some sleep. And I have taken 5 hours off and then gotten back in the car. Like when we won the Baja 1000, I raced for like 5 hours. I got out, and then I got back in at the end of the race, like the last 5 hours, and let Rick and Lewis do the middle. So you can do that too.
So it just depends on what your strategy is, I imagine.
It's it's strategy, competition, where other people's strengths and weaknesses are, finding out who's going to drive their vehicle and when they're driving, things like that. And that's the fun.
Now your racing team there, the guys that you race with there, did you guys all start together, or how is that kind of stuff put together? Is this kind of assembled by yourself, or do people just sort of come to you like, hey, I want to race with you?
Well, there's a lot of that, and I take really good care of my people. We try to do nice hotel rooms and good meals. And we hand out T-shirts and hats and make people feel a part of something special. So we got a pretty good pick of good guys. But it's amazing when you have a race team, people come out of the woodwork like, hey, I can help. And then you realize who's good at helping and who's not.
You saw, I kind of want your help. Just be a fan. Use your hands. That's cool. Well, speaking of which, now, I think that sounds. If there's any, I love racing in general, but this looks really cool to me just because of the big trucks. And my favorite car that I ever had was I had an H2 Hummer when I first came out. And even though I don't like trucks in general, I'm not a truck driver. I'm usually a sports car guy. But that was my favorite vehicle of all time, and it was because I knew where that vehicle was always at. And everybody always asked me, "Oh, did you take it off road?" I was like, "No, man, I had it all chromed out." I was like, "Do it, you a pussy." It's like,
get it dirty.
I don't want to ding it. I don't want to bend something. I was like, that'd be my luck. Bend the frame or something. I don't know. But nowadays, I think if I probably did, I'd probably go, okay, I'll get somebody to go out there and see if I can throw up some dirt.
Yeah, sure.
Now you. I saw you do some things. I wanted to ask you about this. You have a wine business of sorts, and it's connected to your passion for some of these orphanages in Mexico. So tell everybody a little bit about that. I'm curious about it. I've never heard of anything like this, but tell me what you're doing and how this is important to you.
Yeah, so I've been in the wine and spirits business probably the last 20 plus years. I was the vice president of Kettle One vodka for marketing PR for 9.5. And then I started a tequila company that I left in 2017 and really was off to pursue being a father and raising my kids and spending some time with my wife. And she laughs at me. She's like, yeah, you retired for 2 days.
Found something else.
Yeah, well, I was down in Baja with a friend, and we were touring the wineries in the Valle de Guadalupe there, which is just north of Ensenada. It's a beautiful wine country. And he says, hey, we should import this wine as a bootstrap fund business, and he wanted to do some marketing around it because he owned a marketing company, Blue Sea Advertising. And I said, yeah, that sounds like fun. He's like, well, think about it. So I came back to him. I said, look, I'm interested in doing something. We can bootstrap this, but I would like to donate a percentage of our proceeds back to the orphanages. Eric and I have been working with Baja Orphanages for probably the last 15 years.
What kind of organization are they? I'm not familiar with that organization.
Well, it's not an organ. I'm literally meaning there's probably 100 orphanages in Baja, Mexico, that bring in kids off the streets and give them a home.
Oh wow! Food and shelter and clothing.
Does
the government fund them, or are they funded by people just like you?
They're funded with people like me.
Oh wow! So nobody.
Yeah, it's pretty light on the support. So. And as off-road racers, most of us that go down there try to give back in one way or another, and we've all tended to gravitate towards the orphanages.
Oh, so I didn't know that. Okay.
It's inbred in our spirit. So I said, look, if we're going to do this wine business, let's donate back to the orphanages. And that's how that started. So we're importing wine from Baja. Our company's called Baja United Wines, and we sell wines from 5 different wineries that are down there. And then we donate back a percentage back to orphanages. And it's just been, so there's a foundation in Irvine, California called Corazon de Vida. And Hilda, who runs that, grew up in Baja at an orphanage. And she eventually moved to the U.S. and started this foundation. So we work with her so that we can transfer money to them in the U.S. and U.S. dollars. And she knows what orphanages are good to work with and what their needs are. And so it's just been a great relationship for us, and we know that every bottle of wine we sell, something's going back to the kids down there.
That's nice.
Yeah, that's
do you ever get a chance when you're down there racing or whatever, or for the wine business, do you get a chance to see some of the orphanages, see some of the children?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's several videos out there, my race videos that we show that we're at the orphanages. We try to be careful of showing pictures of the kids and stuff just for safety and security. But we absolutely try to go down there every time that we're in the area. We take the race cars over and let the kids play around the race cars and stickers and posters and stuff.
That's awesome. Do they? I'm curious. Like, how many kids are we talking about at these orphanages? I don't know. I know in like Russia, there used to be a lot of children that were unwanted, and they would go to these giant orphanages where there would be like literally hundreds of children, babies, and totally neglected. It's horrible situations. And then you have places like here where we've pretty much eliminated orphanages. There's no more of those anymore. We have foster care and that kind of stuff. And there's inherent problems built into both. But how many kids are we talking about over there in Mexico?
Well, the ones we were working with had anywhere from 50 to 100 kids.
That's a lot of kids.
And they were decent-sized facilities, but the government's really cracked down on how many kids can be in the facilities. And they're on a pro put the kids with an extended family member. So let's just say that the parents are abusive and they've been taken out of that household and in an orphanage. The government wants to seek extended relatives that would be willing to take those kids in a protected environment so that they are within a family organization. So if that doesn't happen, though, the orphanages now, I believe, are limited to 20 kids per orphanage. Okay. So it's much smaller, more manageable. And there's a lot of inherent problems with that, too, because you've just taken if you think about an orphanage that had accommodated 75 kids, there's a business plan around that, right? There's infrastructure for that. Now, all of a sudden, they only have 20 kids. What happens to that building of 20 rooms that's now vacant? Right. So there's a lot of little issues with that. So they got to figure it out. I do think that the spirit of putting kids with extended family members is a good idea.
I think it is too. Every child wants to feel that we all need a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that children who grow up in an orphanage or who have that experience, you spend the rest of your life sometimes, I think, like trying to fill those holes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of sad. I personally believe that every person on this planet deserves to feel their worthiness so.
And that's what I love about Corazon de Vida is they'll follow a kid along their lifespan through the orphanage, and when they grow, when they turn 18 and they're ready to leave the orphanage, there's a program with Corazon that allows them to get some college programming.
Oh wow.
So maybe there's a housing need or tuition need, but they'll follow the child along through college. And we just had 2 graduate last year that'll go off into careers, and they're actually citizens now in the U.S. So
that's awesome.
It's really fantastic.
I'm curious, and I don't want to, and I don't usually, I try to watch it with some of the political talk because I don't mind it. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. There's no topics that are ever off limit to me. I never get offended about anything. But how does all the stuff that's going on with Trump and the stuff with the border control kind of issues? Being from California, personally, I don't really think that that we should have walls and things like that. But that's a personal choice that I have. That's a personal opinion. But is this affecting those orphanages, like their ability to come to the United States when they get ready or whatnot?
No, because we're utilizing systems that are currently in place.
Okay.
I like the attention that the border is receiving right now, because my hope and desire is that the systems get better for legal immigration.
Absolutely.
Right? Because regardless of how we feel about people that have migrated here illegally, there's a lot of really good people that are afraid to come this way because they don't want to break the law, right?
Exactly.
And typically those are people that I've employed at my tequila factory, or people that I've met in Baja that would love to come here to the U.S. And I've had my own frustrations trying to get somebody up here legally, and our system's so bogged down. I hope that this new attention will create better systems so people can come here legally, get the documentation they need, and live here comfortably without looking over their shoulder.
I totally agree 1,000%. I don't necessarily like the solutions that are being presented today. I do think that it's a trajectory, right? Like we have to work along a trajectory of success and So I'm with you. I really think that anybody and everybody should be able to come to the United States and participate in a meaningful way and contribute. And there's always going to be people that don't, right?
Yep.
Always going to be. So there's people that are born here that don't.
Exactly.
We wouldn't want to hold all the other good people up just because a couple don't want to. So tell me about the wine business. Where do you sell at? Like, is it just online? Is it at stores?
Yeah, if you go on to BajaUnitedWines.com, you can order a bottle, and we have a back-end shopping program that can ship to 35 states. So if you've got somebody outside of California, we ship to 35 states. And then we are in some retail in Southern California. We're very heavy in San Diego, so places like Costco and Whole Foods.
Can I get it on my Costco here?
Yeah, probably Northgate Market, Vallarta Markets. And then in Orange County, we're in like a Vaughn's Pavilion, which of course is a big chain store. And then beyond that's independent stores, but we're in a lot of restaurants. One of our brands, Monte Chinique, which is the first luxury wine out of Mexico. We've got great distribution with them all over the state. So, it's doing quite well.
So they're all reds? Tell me about the wine selection.
No, we've got whites and reds. So we represent 5 wineries, and they've got, whether it's a Cab or a Merlot, a Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Colombard, a Chardonnay, an unoaked Chardonnay. I mean, we've got full varietals. I think with Monte Chinique, we've got 10 varietals with them, including a very high-end, expensive blend. So we've got a little bit of everything. And then, by the way, we just launched a Baja style lager, which is a craft beer. So it's called Baja Unidos Cerveza. It's a 5.2% alcohol. So we're right there, kind of above a Modelo, but below like a normal IPA from the craft brewery.
Is there a lot of hops in that, or is it real hoppy?
Well, we use Mexican hops and barley, so it gets a little bit of that kind of that Modelo flavor there. But we say it's sessionable, so that you might have a few, not just one, because it's too heavy, right? So
I love dark beers, heavy beers. I like those. Those are my personal favorite. But I also like Hefeweizens and stuff like that. I generally like anything that's, well, if it's brewed well. I just don't like the IPAs.
Yeah.
It's
an IPA.
Yeah, that's. But it sounds like you guys are making the stuff that I like. I love ports. I love Pinots. And most robust reds. So maybe I'll have to order some of your guys' wine.
A little bit of everything there, buddy.
What got you started in doing that? Was it your previous experience with the Kettle One, or?
Well, the wine country down there is so fascinating. They've really built it out. It's robust in terms of their architecture there and their style, the artistic abilities of not only the winemakers, but the wine facilities themselves. And some of the top chefs in Mexico have gravitated and moved into the Valle de Guadalupe. So overall, just the culture got me excited about it. I was not a wine person.
I am now.
Okay. I am now. So, it's just been fun to explore that and be a part of something that was on the cusp. A lot of the business had to do with, after we decided to bootstrap it, I called my friends over at Young's Market Company, which is a distributor in California. I said, hey, would you guys distribute this for me? And they said, Jim, we've been looking for Baja wines. We'll take everything you have. So I thought, okay, that's a good sign.
That's a good sign. Now, what makes the Baja? And I actually lived in Northern California, in the Bay Area, for several years. Spent some time up in Sonoma and Napa Valley, and I loved it up there. It was beautiful. The wineries were very nice, and they have some. I guess there's some uniqueness out there. I don't know. But what kind of separates the Baja wines from some of the California wines?
Yeah, and by the way, I'm in Salinas right now, taking this call. So it's south of where you were at, but it's beautiful here, right? And you can just tell the climate. So this is actually the agricultural capital of the world, right here in Salinas. All your lettuce and all those things come from this area. But to answer your question specifically, that the parallel of the equator where Baja's at, particularly this region, is the same as Rome. So you've got a great growing climate for grapes, right? So you've got, there's a little bit of an elevation, and it's literally in a valley, right? So in the daytime, you've got nice hot temperatures. But then in the evening, because the ocean is within 10 miles away, you've got those cool airs that come up and over the mountains and settle in, and those grapes cool back off. And those are ideal conditions for the grape growing. Now, granted, if you got a really hot winter and you're not getting a lot of rain, you're going to have water issues, but it's a perfect climate for growing grapes and making wine down there.
I love wine, and I think, and usually people, when they think of wine, especially, I think it was after the 70s, the mid-70s, when California became very popular with the wine. And of course, everybody touted it as something really wonderful, and it is. There's some really great wines, of course, everywhere, I think. The ones that I haven't liked, and I would be interested in your opinion, the ones that I haven't liked is ones from Argentina. Do you know the difference?
I haven't explored beyond California wines and now Baja wines. I've had a little New Zealand, but like I said, I wasn't a wine person, and what's interesting, and it's probably exactly what you're describing, is, you start drinking wine from a region or an appellation, and you accustomed to that and the flavor profile and the things that you taste in that varietal. And that becomes, I don't want to say it becomes your next favorite, but that becomes what your palate adjusts to.
Yeah.
Right? So
Totally.
I have adjusted to the Baja wines. I've really found what I loved within that. I'll go to a California cab and be like, okay, this is heaven on earth. But, at the same time, I really appreciate what Baja is doing as well in their wines.
That's awesome. I like that. I had no idea that there was these wineries out there. I didn't know that there was, and I didn't know the conditions were similar. I know there's a lot of, excuse me. I know there's several parts of the world that have some really wonderful wines. I didn't know this either until later in life, but I went to Oregon State University for my undergraduate, and it's right there in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and that has some of the best Pinot Noirs that I've ever had in my life. That for whatever reason, the soil conditions, whatever it is, man, if you guys have a Pinot, man, then you guys are my friend. Because that's what I prefer Pinot Noirs. I don't know why. I always prefer reds in general, but specifically Pinot Noirs. And whenever I go to a restaurant, if they got a Willamette Valley Pinot, I order it.
Yeah, you're in.
Because I'm always happy with it.
Yeah. Well, I hate to break the news to you, but Baja does not grow a good Pinot.
Well, that's okay. I do want to try that lager, though. I think I'll try that lager.
Yeah, you can figure that out.
Now,
I got to tell you. Go ahead, please.
Oh no. I was just going to ask you to compare and contrast your experiences with Kettle One. I totally forgot that was part of your history. Like what? And when you retired and then decided to go do the racing thing and the wine thing. But what kind of career was that like? There's so many people now I see like. They have these vodkas. There's like celebrities, and I'm just like, it seems like at one time there was like 3 brands when I was growing up, and now there's like 20,000. It's like, what's the deal?
Well, the craft movement of distilleries. People are popping up all over with the whiskey and vodkas. Across the U.S. Tito's really kind of established the craft vodka market here in the U.S. Although there's been craft distillers out there for 50, 75 years. The contrast between Kettle One and what I'm doing now is that Kettle One is a European company. It's owned by the Dutch. Very formal. We wore suit and ties to work. We drove fancy cars. We had thick carpet in the office. And, we sold a luxury item, and that was a great world to be in, man. I was at it. I went to every party across the United States. I met every celebrity that there was to meet, and dignitary and politician, and I was living the life. And the brand itself was doing great. It sold, the brand rights sold to Diageo when I left. It was almost $1 billion for the brand rights to Diageo. The family retained half the company to continue producing it. So then to go from there into the tequila business in Mexico and then the wine business in Mexico, you're talking about a beautiful laid-back society, farming, agriculture, wonderful. The food is completely different. By the way, I love Mexican food way more than Dutch food. If you've been to Holland, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it was completely the opposite, worlds, but yet we all came together. I always look at it is that we were in the entertainment business. People go to a bar to enjoy themselves and have a cocktail. It's what I like to describe as affordable luxury, right? You can afford to buy yourself a $15 Kettle One martini and feel like, okay, I've achieved a little success today, as opposed to the $250,000 Bentley that nobody can afford.
Right.
So that, and you're at the bar, you're socializing with friends. And regardless of what company I worked for, I feel like we're in the entertainment business, right? So I enjoyed both equally. One just had a bigger budget than the other.
Usually when I'm talking to athletes, I'll ask them funny fan stories. But what's a cool story from some of those days working for Kettle One when meeting and greeting different people? And do you have any funny or cool stories?
Well, look, I literally probably every celebrity of the time, from the Tom Cruises, Clint Eastwoods of the world. I spent time with the director of the Secret Service, so when you look at dignitaries, I did a party. And, well, here's a funny story, right? And it's relevant on this that very light touch on politics. The president of Kettle One hated gift bags because he thought that they were cheap, right? Like, he's like, no, we're not going to give anything for gift bags. They're cheap. And I always try to tell him, like, no, seriously, these celebrity events, man, everybody wants the gift bag because they're good, right? So I talked him into doing this event. It was for Denise Rich. She's a famous producer in New York City. and very, very, very connected. Matter of fact, the screen presentation that they gave was Nelson Mandela from wherever he was at, Africa, right? So he gave a
Holy mackerel.
Oprah was there, everybody's there, right? So I'm in line to leave the event because I represented our company and we had donated Kettle One to the event. I'm in line, and guess who's in front of me in line to get their gift bag?
Who?
Donald Trump.
No kidding.
So I get back to the office in California. I said, Bill, I know you didn't like those gift bags, but you know what? This billionaire Donald Trump,
he picked up
his gift bag.
So I guess after that, you guys probably did more gift bags.
Did a couple more, so that was, it was just a lot of funny little stories like that. I will tell you because, you're dealing with athletes and stuff. I had a chance to meet Evander Holyfield at an event. And, I walk up to him, I introduce myself, and he reaches out to shake my hand. And I tell you what, man, that man has a paw so big. And, super nice guy, shook his hand. And I walked away thinking, oh my gosh, could you imagine getting hit by that?
It's totally,
right?
It's exactly what it is, man. Some of the best fighters, they have really heavy hands.
And just big,
yeah.
Just big. And I was like, walked away. I was like, wow. So yeah, there's just all kinds of little. I almost got in a fight with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh shit! I don't know if that's a fight you want to get in, man.
Oh no, it wasn't one I was trying to pick either. There were some footballs on the tables. It was the Longest Yard movie premiere that we were at.
Okay.
Kind of the celebrity area, and it was at the end of the night, and there was a football on the table. And this girl that worked for me, she's like, "Hey, there's a football here. Like nobody claimed it. Can I take it?" I'm like, "I don't know. If there's nobody around, I'm sure it's not a big deal." He comes running out of nowhere and chews her out, up one side, down the other. And I just like cut in the middle. I'm like, whoa, dude. Like, thanks, man. You pointed out or what?
You want me to get you a football?
Right? Oh, yeah. We almost went to blows. I'm like, whoa.
Why was he so upset? He wanted that football?
That was his football.
Oh, okay. Like, take your football, man.
Exactly. That's what we all said. Anyway, it was a fantastic life. So it's fun to look back on. But I'm creating great memories with different clients I'm working with now and things that I'm doing. I was excited to talk to you because I spent a lot of time racing the Spartan Race Series competitively the last year and a half. And when you talk about diet and exercise and stuff like that, it's such a critical component of what I'm doing in the Spartan Series too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And whether it be, even if it doesn't matter if you're in a sport like bodybuilding where it's all about really aesthetics, getting the body to look a certain way, or whether it's about performance, whether you're a rugby player or like a race car driver or whatever it is, we do it within these machines that we call bodies. And this machine needs service. And it needs maintenance constantly. And if you want to tweak it so that it performs exactly the way you want, that's all we're really doing, right? Like we're just tweaking things. Cardiovascular fitness, the energy that we provide our bodies, the repair that we do for it, how well we maintain the joints and our muscles and all these things. Not to mention how we actually physically train it biochemically. So what you eat, how you sleep, what stress you manage, all these things create a biochemical environment within your body that will absolutely influence heavily the output that you get.
I have learned so much about that in this last year. And I said it earlier, I've always done some kind of physical fitness, but it wasn't with the intent of being a competitive obstacle course racer, which I am now. Last year I had the short-term joy of being number one in the world for men over 50 in the Spartan age group series.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I had a lot of wins. But you learn things like if you want to be faster, every pound that you weigh, you can shave off 30 seconds. A mile. If I lose a pound, I can shave off 30 seconds. So I'm like, okay, well, let's lose a bunch of weight and we'll be faster. But in Spartan racing, you have obstacles where you have to pick up heavy stuff and lift and hoist and all. So you need muscle mass, right? So you need the perfect combination of both. Because if I lose too much weight, I can't lift up the hoist, right? Because it's either lifting me up or I don't have the muscle anymore. Mm-hmm. So I've learned so much about dialing in my body where I want it to be for speed and strength, but also not eating for pleasure, but eating, like you said, to fuel the machine.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly.
100 octane fuel might not smell or taste good, but we know it works.
Works good, yeah.
Yeah. So, I've learned to not very good at it, is to eat for the health benefit and what my machine needs, not what my mouth and brain say I need.
Well, the funny thing, I go through this a lot with a lot of my athletes and all of my clients. That I try to give them a snapshot of the human experience, because I feel like if people understand this, then they'll really kind of get a sense of how to demystify some of these things you're talking about, with their eating habits and stuff like that. And our bodies, like on this, we've been on this planet walking around in this form for about 60,000 years, something like that. And most of the time that we've evolved, most of that time we haven't had the availability of all the resources that we now enjoy, like going to the store, just picking up what you want, going to your cupboard, just getting what you want. When we want to eat something, we ask ourselves two questions. Am I hungry? What do I feel like eating? Okay, now most of the human experience, it was, I'm hungry, what's around?
What can I kill?
What can I kill, dig up, eat, or what can I steal from somebody else? Like, what is around me that I can eat right now? And so there wasn't a whole lot of planning. And so you live generations like that, and all of a sudden you build the system that we have, this machine has evolved to be able to accommodate that. The problem is that now in the contemporary society, which is really maybe 100 years old in the form that we have it now, with refrigeration and processing foods and all these things, right? All the things that we know, our bodies are totally thrown out of whack. We have to be so much smarter because we no longer eat for subsistence. And that's the difference. If you were to say, oh, I'm hungry, and eat when you're hungry, that's a subsistence mentality. That says, I'm going to eat when I'm hungry because if I don't, something bad could happen. But for somebody who wants optimal performance, like an Olympic athlete or Mr. Olympia, some of these guys that I work with in the bodybuilding industry, you eat because you want the response. You say, it's not, I don't eat because I'm hungry necessarily, although sometimes you are. I spent a lot of times all through my 20s and 30s. I'm 48 now. I've been bodybuilding for 34 years. Most of my adult life, I spent force feeding myself food that I did not want to fucking eat. I'm like 7 meals a day. I'm eating. It's just like, get it down. And I would tell this to my clients for years. Food is function. Food is function. It's nothing more. When you make it something else, then you will most likely change what you get. Otherwise I just eat cake and ice cream all day. Like that's. Yes. so we do. You're absolutely right. We live these machines that we have. If you understand a few basic dynamics of nutrition, you don't have to know it all. The great thing today is now we have the internet. We have coaches and resources and people that are willing to help with these things that totally take the mystery out of that whole process. But the problem is that most people struggle with their desire. They're so in the habit. Their behavior habit is, I'm hungry, I eat. What do I feel like eating? I eat that. That's what they're used to. And when they don't do that, they feel deprived. They're like, oh my God, like all I get to eat every morning is oatmeal? Yeah, motherfucker, that's what your body needs. That's what it is. Like, well, can I have this? Can I have this? Well, you can, absolutely. But the problem is there are consequences to that. What you do most persistently and consistently is what shows up in the mirror and in your life. Like, you're just going to see this. It's going to see it. So if you don't like it,
so are you an advocate for oatmeal?
I'm totally an advocate for oatmeal. There's not many foods I don't think you could integrate into a diet, with the exception of foods that I think we do way too much. Well, don't get me started on the corn lobby in the United States, but high fructose corn syrup, I have just eliminated that completely from my house because it is the worst compound possible that we could be possibly put into our bodies practically. It's literally killing us. But I do believe if you can kill it or if you can grow it or if you can dig it up, then it's probably okay for us to eat for the most part. It's when we start adding things to it or taking things away from the foods that when it becomes a problem. The biggest problem that I see these days, one of the problems actually, I shouldn't say it's the biggest, but it's one of the problems I see these days is all the additives and all the things that we put in our meats, and the meat is just not good quality. Like, most people don't realize that. Most people rely on getting their omegas from food sources from things like salmon, stuff like that. But technically, you're supposed to get it from beef, chicken. You're supposed to get it from all of those animals naturally in nature ate that stuff. And so we should be getting, but we don't. And if you know anything about nutrition, omega-3 fatty acids, you need them every day because every cell in your body, there's a cellular membrane wall. That membrane wall is made out of that. Is made out of those fats. And if you don't get it, and every 7 years, every cell in your body replaced, all new cells. So you got to have a constant influx of these good nutrients. If not, then things start to break down. Maybe not in big ways, but they do start to break down. And that's why people blame it on age. No, man, I'm better than I was when I was in my 20s.
Me too. Well, I was asking about oatmeal because I'm going to give you an oatmeal recipe, which maybe you haven't had before, right?
Go for it. Let me hear it.
Or maybe your listeners. So I take rolled oats and I mix them with Greek yogurt at night. Oh. So just mix a cup and a cup, right? Mix it up, put it in the refrigerator, and when I wake up in the morning, the oats have saturated with the yogurt, the Greek yogurt, right? And then I add diced, prunes or something, some type of healthy dried fruit on top. And that's my breakfast and my snack. And if I'm cutting weight, it'll be my lunch. Okay. And then later in the afternoon, I'll throw a protein in there. But with the yogurt, Greek yogurt with the oats overnight is delicious.
It sounds good. No, it sounds good. Because I like it soft too. Some people just mix it in a blender. I like it sort of soft, I don't like to.
Somebody told me when you cook your oats, you're cooking out the nutrients that are actually good for you in the oats. And so I bought into that, and I like it better when it's cold with the yogurt anyhow, so who cares?
Technically, there's something you denature when you cook. So some things you can't denature, but it's usually pretty minuscule. And most times, we actually need it. It actually helps with the digestive process. Actually, if people are interested, cooking, when we introduced cooking into the human experience, it helped us become one of the superior creatures on the planet because we were able. Because now we can eat more food. If you don't cook your food, then you have to digest it. And so if you look at monkeys, they don't cook their food, but look how big their bellies are, and they're ripped. Their bellies are big. Why? Because I used to wonder that when I was a kid. I'm like, is he fat? Like, he don't look fat, but his belly is big. But the reason why is because they're digested. They're always eating. They're eating raw leaves and twigs and plants and stuff, and that stuff stays in the gut and has to be digested. It takes time. If they were able to cook their food, guess what happens? The body types start to look like ours. Instead, the intestines and everything start to come down, and all of a sudden you get this physique that you look like today. So another cool, interesting phenomenon that happened was monkeys. If you look, they're not very good rock throwers. They suck because they throw the rock. They have to throw it like this. Their joints, the shoulders they don't have lateral movement like we do. Once you make the transition to a human skeletal structure, all of a sudden now we can throw like this, like a baseball player. You can throw from the side, and you have lateral movement with your arm. Well, that made us, believe it or not, pretty superior killers. So then now, we could. There's a funny story. I think it was not really funny to them, but I think it was the Spaniards that came over to South America some way back when. And the natives there, they didn't have any technology like the Spaniards did. They had guns and, muskets and stuff and armor. And these guys just had rocks. But there was a couple hundred of them, and they pelted these guys with rocks from the cliffs above, and they ran them right off the shores. It's kind of a funny story. But we have some genetic advantages for this, and it has a lot to do with how we eat. And so cooking is a benefit for us, but it's also, you're right. The things that I would not cook as much is vegetables, because the enzymatic activity inside them you kill, and eggs. Believe it or not, eggs, the whites, great. Yolks, don't cook them. It's actually more healthy for you not to cook the yolk and just to eat it in raw format or in a gooey format.
That's never going to happen. Hey, I don't want to commandeer your show, but I have a couple questions.
Go for it. I'm happy to ask.
What about MCT oils?
Oh, that's a good one, and I'm glad you asked it because I have it on.
Somebody sent me some. I had a guy on my show, and guy gone keto.
Okay.
And anyways, he sent me some MCT oils. I'm like, okay, I know I probably need these, but I don't know anything about them. What am I supposed to do with them? It's oil. Cook it, eat it.
So here's what you can do. You can do both those. You can either drink it or you can cook it, use it to cook with. Put it on your salads, put it on your vegetables, put it on your meat. Just in its regular form. You don't have to do anything with it. I put it in my protein drink. I'll use MCT oil in the morning. I'll put it in my protein drink along with my other mixture of vitamins and stuff for the day. But essentially, MCTs is what they call a medium chain triglyceride. It's a medium chain fat. Most fats have long chains, right? So when you digest it, your body first has to emulsify it and then breaks off pieces of this fat chain to give you energy slowly. That's why energy from fats are a lot more long-lasting, that is, and they get released slower. But MCTs are medium chains, so the chain is shorter, and so they're broken off easier. So it's quicker in your system. It doesn't cause an insulin spike. It does so you don't get this. You don't get hungrier, because if you cause insulin spikes when you eat, then you'll get hungrier, and that's nature doing its business. But MCT oil does something very particular, because of its nature. You have these things called caprylic acid, which is the major constituents in it. They go by acronyms: C8, C9, C10s. It's the C8s that are so important, and many of the brands don't do this, but there's one or two brands. The ones that I recommend, I have MCT oil, by the way, on almost every program that I write. And I usually have it from Perillo Performance, because he was the first guy, I know John Perillo, but he was the first guy in the 90s to do research and to work with athletes with MCT oil and see how well it did help their performance, specifically bodybuilding athletes losing fat and giving them energy while they worked out without giving them carbs. And this is exactly what it did, because C8s, when you ingest them, convert directly to ketones. They automatically convert to ketones. And what that does is, and you heard these people with the bullet drink, they're made with coffee, and MCT oil, people use that, and they say, oh yeah, I feel good. It's because, one, it's brain protective. MCT oil is brain protective. It helps your brain. But when those ketones, your brain uses that as fuel right away. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to get your sugar in. You don't have to get anything. You drink that in your coffee, or you put that in your food in the morning, and all of a sudden your brain has instant ketones to be able to drive energy from. So it feels good. It doesn't feel bad. Like when you eat just fats and protein, if you've ever been on a keto diet, you're like, the first week or so, it sucks. Because if you've been used to eating carbs, you're like, oh man, I got low energy. Your body wants screaming at you for carbs. It's telling you to eat. Yeah. And you don't, and you just feel miserable. But then once you get over that hump, then your body realigns, starts to process more energy from ketone bodies and from fats basically, and some protein structures. And so that's what happens. So MCT oil is just a great way to give you some fats, some healthy fats that will stimulate your metabolism, increase fat burning, and not work against you. It's not like just like adding like olive oil. You can do that, but it doesn't have the same powerful effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like I got to hang up and go take some MCT. All right, I got another question for you, because we were talking about alcohol, wine or spirits. I do a lot of consulting now for work. I consult with different companies. I'm in Salinas, and it's no secret what happens in Salinas to most of Northern Californians. This is the cannabis central area of California. And I'm consulting for a company called Harvest Pacific. Okay. They've got a brand called California Canna, and they grow cannabis. I'm helping them do some corporate infrastructure. And, I'm looking at the product, and it's natural, and I'm thinking, I'm not a user, but, I'm thinking also the effects of alcohol on my body. And look, I'm not going to give up my cocktail or my glass of wine, but I'm thinking as an athlete, right? As an athlete, when I'm watching how many calories and sugars I'm putting in my body and the effects of alcohol, how should I feel about converting to a cannabis product potentially? I mean, have you done any research on that with athletes? They talk about training on maybe like a sativa cannabis product, edible, so you're not smoking it, and training like maybe a cyclist or high endurance training. I've even seen on some of these websites says this particular cannabinoid is great for working out. It heightens your awareness and your accuracy. I'm like, I never even thought about that, right, until I started working up here. And these guys are great people, by the way. Look them up, Harvest Specific. They're on Instagram, Harvest Specific Farms. Beautiful facility and product. But what, from an athlete standpoint, what are your thoughts there?
Well, a lot of people have asked me this for years and years and years.
Good, I'm not the first one.
No, years and years and years, especially nowadays, right now with all the legislation as it's changing, and it's becoming a lot more cannabis friendly in the United States. And I suspect that within 10 years, it'll be there won't be an issue.
Within a year.
Yeah, probably, which I'm so thankful for, because there's too many medical benefits. There's too many health benefits to cannabis and CBDs that you just can't get around. Like, you just can't get around this. This is a plant that we have a very long heritage with as a human species. And I think kind of a spiritual one, to be honest. But as an athlete, I actually know a lot of high-level athletes, as well as who will smoke a little bit before they train, or do cardio. Not a sativa, something that doesn't totally make them want to lay on the couch and eat potato chips. They want something that. But
that's the indica. The indica is the one that on the couch.
Which is the one that I like. Those are the ones I like because I usually only do it at night. I like, it'll help me relax for the day. But when they do this, they just take a very little bit, maybe 1 or 2 hits off of a vape pen or something. Most of them will not do the edibles because it's too intense. They don't want the intensity because you get much more of your liver actually metabolizes it differently, so you get a much stronger effect when you do the edibles. But when they'll go and do a little bit along with some caffeine or some pre-workout because they want the stimulant. If you get the stimulatory effect with this with the cannabis, then what most of them report, and I have to say I've done it several times in my lifetime, and it does. What you get is this focusing. It's like, how when you're on the cardio or you're doing something, and sometimes if your mind isn't on your work, on what you're doing, then it's not as effective as a workout as it would be as if you were completely focused. Mm-hmm. And so this is what they like, especially when people who are like, oh man, I hate doing my fucking cardio every morning. I got to do an hour of cardio. It's like I hate doing this. And then if they smoke a little bit before then and they do their cardio, it's like, oh yeah, I just breeze through it, man. It's like, So I do think from a health benefit, there's nothing that suggests that that it by itself is gonna be unhealthy for your process, your athletic process. But it's not to say that that some people might encourage them to cheat on their diet. And in my world, in my world, the diets are very fixed. So like you have a structure. You're eating this meal 1, this meal 2, this meal 3, this meal 4, this meal 5, et cetera, et cetera. Take these supplements then. So everything is regimented. So when you introduce a variable like this, you just got to be. They just have to know their own body and know, are you going to be able to withstand the munchies if you get the munchies? Because some people get it, some people don't. I've never really gotten too bad at that. Like I never cheated on my diets, even when I was training for shows, and I might smoke in the evening. But as a matter of fact, the reason, I'll tell you a funny story, the reason why I even started, because I was completely against anything foreign, even alcohol going in my body until I was like, I didn't even drink alcohol until I was like 33. So it's like, and I changed my mind because my ex-wife she was getting her master's as a nurse practitioner. She was a nurse in the ICU and in the hospital for many years, and then she went on to try to manage care. And she did it. And when she was going to San Diego, she was going to University of San Diego, and in their nurse practitioner program. And she did one semester. She had like some kind of report on, and she chose medical marijuana. and so I'm sitting here going, oh man, educate me. And everything that I believe that I was told when I was growing up, oh, it's a gateway drug, it kills your brain cells, all these things that are so horrible for you, were all unfounded. There were just no science behind it. There's nothing that said that any of these things actually did these things. As a matter of fact, there were all these good things, like, the THC part, the kind that everybody likes, that piece of it, there's less medical benefits. But the CBDs and I believe that the full spectrum herb, you get a much more powerful anti-inflammatory, systemic anti-inflammatory effect, which is I think in my opinion, it's most beneficial use for Americans or for people who want to use it here. Even athletes, because when you go work out, you know what you do? You're inflaming the body, you're stressing the body, and those tissues and stuff get inflamed. And so some people's bodies, because of their eating, because of their stress management and so forth, and their diet, it doesn't impact them as much. But some people, they'll go do a leg workout and they're like, man, my legs are swollen for the next day. Or they'll do cardio and they're like, oh man, Dad, my pants are so tight the next day. I'm like, because your body is inflamed. It's inflamed. It's like you get this inflammatory response. And our intestines get it from food, from preservatives, additives. So we got to find ways to get the inflammation under control. Because if you don't, you know what happens? Cancer and death. You can't live with inflammation for too many years before something goes wrong. It breaks. It's like not putting oil in your car. You might be able to run it for a few miles, but it won't go too long before it breaks. So the same thing with our body. So there's definitely, I think when it comes to the cannabis, the CBDs are the most powerful for the athlete. Yeah.
Well, I tore an ACL back in February in the Spartan racing, and it was only a 3/4 tear. Not only, but I've been rubbing a THC CBD oil tincture on it every day, twice a day.
Good.
And that's for acute pain most often, and I've had very little pain at all. And I'll attribute it to my physical therapist trainer. but as well as utilizing that product on my knee,
You might also try some of the, like, again, I just happen to be privy to all these things in the athletic world. There's two products. One's called TB400 and the other one's called BPC 157. Both of those were originally studied by companies like Glaxo Wellcome, and I think I forget the other company, but as a way to give something to give to post-operative patients or burn patients, something to be able to repair connective tissue quickly, very quickly. So, man, I've had people who've been into surgery, had their appendix removed, had different things like cut into their abdomen, and next thing you know, within 3 weeks they're back at the gym, and the doctor and my doctor's like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" Like, well, how are you healing so fast? Keep doing it, whatever you're doing. So they really do work. The problem was they didn't see any they didn't see the payback for it, like to recoup the money. I don't think that they were able to really they didn't think they could market it, so they just shelved it. So it's in that gray area product where it's not illegal, but it's also not really easily. If you have to know about it and know how to find. I'll send you some information. You can read about it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I want to get back to competing, man.
A lot of guys I know who compete in bodybuilding, because you're putting so much poundages on the body all the time, and you're one of the things that ends up happening is you get these tendon issues like tendonitis and things like that, and they use, a lot of the guys I know will use things like the TB400 or specifically the BPC 157, which is a peptide, and they use that ritually throughout each week so they don't get injured, or they stay sort of out of injury. Because it will I've used it. It just increases the tendon, the tendon and the connective tissue, also musculaturely, but mostly in the tendons and stuff. The BPC fixes on the tendons and the ligaments and those kinds of things, that it helps to really heal and repair. And that's so important, because we just don't eat a lot of the constituents that we need. Like when we were hunter-gatherers, like we were chewing on bones and we were eating sinew and we were eating tendons and all this stuff, but now we just eat the meat. Yeah. And so when you leave out the other stuff, then we don't. That's what our body needs to heal that stuff that we damage. Like if you rip your tendons, then you need this material. So I would also recommend chondroitin, MSM, glucosamine sulfate for your skin, for tendons, for muscles, for all those things, all the joints and soft tissue. Take it every day. 3,000 milligrams a day. Take every day. That's what I would say. I do.
I'm going to be a new human being here after this show.
Maybe that'd be great.
Yeah.
So no problem. That's it. This is the way I tell people, like, if you're over 40, if you're approaching 40 or over 40, you have to become a master at recovery, because I'm sorry, like when you're 20, you can get away with a lot of stuff, but once you get over 35, 40, then all of a sudden, what the barrier to becoming successful with your body, in other words, losing body fat or gaining muscle, is going to be your ability to recover. Okay, because if you can't recover, then you're done. So.
Well, and I don't know what your listener base is, but I got to tell you, at 50, well, when I turned 50, I'm 51 now. My wife says, "Hey, how do you feel?" And she's in her 30s. I said, "You know what? I feel better now at 50 than I have my whole life, because I figured some things out, right?" But what I've also learned is there's a whole bunch of us out there in our 50s that care about fitness and health and diet, that I race against in the Spartan series, that are kicking my butt, or I'm kicking their butt, and we're all jumping 8-foot walls and carrying, Atlas balls and all this other stuff in these races. And I'm proud to be 50. And matter of fact, there's a 60-year-old class, and the guy that's winning everything in the 60s, that guy's a stud. And all I can think about is, wow, if I could be in his shape when I turn 60, I'd be one happy camper. And I guess I'm saying this because I think people should be encouraged as they get older, that we have the opportunity to be healthy and fit and agile. We don't have to be couch potatoes.
I totally agree. I see it very much like, it's like a new car, right? Like you get a new car and it's wonderful. Not everything works. It smells good. That's like our body, right? We start living our life do our kids. We get a couple of nick bumps and bruises. Nothing that's going to set the vehicle, make it not worthy of using it anymore. But the longer you use it, obviously the more things we wear out more things. If you don't maintain it, the longer we use these bodies, the more important it becomes to maintain them. And so I always say, like, look, man, you don't have to have the most perfect working machine to have a great experience in your body, but you can always improve the one that you have. Yeah. At any age, there's not an age where this body will not improve, but unless we don't do anything. So, but we have to tell it. We have to tell it to do this. So
yeah, absolutely.
Part of it, one of the problems that I see, especially with guys over 50 and gals, is there's a better awareness of that they can do these things. So that's good. But on the flip side of it is that it's hard to change behaviors. Mm-hmm. A lot of them want to fit the old lifestyle into the new lifestyle, and they're not congruent. So it's like me saying, I would like to race those races, but I just don't know if I can wear that suit, and I don't know if I need it to be that hot outside. You'd be like, no, dude, you picked the wrong sport. Then in this sport, this is the way it works. It's the same kind of thing with our bodies. So it's like, sure. I kind of think of it like that because I think at my age now, I'm 48. I'm going to turn 49 in a month, and I feel like I look better than I've looked in my life. I was bigger when I was competing because I had to be, but I love the way I look better now. I feel better, and I also think that I can see a trajectory ahead of me now. I know what to do. And I know when shit's going wrong. Like I know when I'm not doing stuff and it happens to me too. That I know I tell myself in my head, hey, if I don't pull this straight here in the next week, then it could lead to 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks. And next thing you know, I got a gut. And I was hanging out with my girlfriend today was her day off, and we spent some time together this morning. She's like, you must have lost a couple of pounds. I'm like, no, I didn't. You see me in the morning now. You can see my abs. And that's my litmus test. I think a lot of guys in my industry are kind of like this. That the litmus test for their I always got to see abs. Like if I can't see my abs, fucking gonna start dieting.
Hold on, let me look down here. All right, they're still there.
They're still there, yeah. They're there underneath my one pack.
All your face.
In your world, like what's going on that's super exciting that you're maybe something new? Are you doing anything new? Like I thought I saw a few other things on your bio page that I was cruising around. You seem to have your hand in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, the consulting's got me pretty busy, but I'm thrilled to be in the cannabis industry right now with Harvest Specific. I'm getting some exposure there. It's like you said, it's such a hot topic in the state of California, so I'm excited about that. I'm doing some life coaching through our buddy David Meltzer. So he gets so many people that call him for support. He can't take them all on, and I've been working with David for about a year and a half now. So I'm doing some work with him on some clients. So that's exciting. And I'm launching a website called Live Life Driven, and it's not out yet. I see you typing away, but livelifedriven.com probably in the next week. And it's all about kind of how to live that life driven and be that person that we're talking about. As well as it's kind of a platform for my podcast, which is just the answer is yes. It's on iTunes. Okay. And we've had a lot of success with that show, public speaking and opportunities as well as life coaching. So I'm just having a lot of fun in my life right now and being able to, have that wine business out there supporting the orphanages. So I appreciate you asking. Physical fitness and being healthy for my 3-year-old and 5-year-old is so important to me. I really try to center my life around that, and everything else is secondary. And I've been able to find a good balance of my kids, health and fitness, as well as working and enjoying the work that I'm doing. And so I'm kind of feeding all the buckets equally, and it's very rewarding for me. And I would encourage your listeners to strive for the same. Seems like you got a nice, well-balanced life, and it's very fulfilling. And I'll say it again, life in my 50s is better than it's been my whole entire time, right? We're better at stuff and we're more knowledgeable. So I'm really encouraged to be where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. I think that's wonderful. I think funny as you were talking, I totally agree with you when it comes to being I'm approaching 50 and I feel that I appreciate my life in deeper and more meaningful ways today than I ever did when I was younger. And that's the most meaningful part to me, is that not only do I feel better, but that's sort of, even if I didn't feel better or look better, like I realize that we all age and my body will not hang out forever. It's not going to hang out forever. But the most significant part of aging for me is, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, the most significant part for me about aging in my life is that I am growing to have a deeper sense of joy and a deeper sense of appreciation for everything that goes on in my life. Even the stuff that people seemingly see as bad. I just literally in my mind have stopped thinking about things as good or bad. Everything is good. I just got to figure out a way to make it that. I just got to figure out a way to sort of translate it in my own thought process. This is good because, and
there's good in everything.
Everything.
And when you perpetuate that, it'll come to you as well. And that's not just in personal happiness, but that also comes in finance and well-being. There's good in everything. If you treat people good, it's going to come back to you. And having ill feelings towards anything is a negative factor in your life. And it's funny. I got schooled by David on the phone, Melter again, about 2 weeks ago. I said, yeah, this is going well. I think the future looks good. He goes, what do you mean you think? You're going to perpetuate that in the universe. Don't think, And I said, you know what? You're right. I do know that. So even dialing in, my own thought process, I'm a very positive person. He dialed me in a little bit more. I thought, you know what? He's right, though. And I've seen the strength in, being grateful for the things that I have and making that a part, that gratefulness being a part of my life every day. Appreciating my family and giving them time. I've seen that come back tenfold financially as well as in time too, to enjoy the things that I like to do. And it's amazing how the environment or the world perpetuates what you put out there. And it's not a cliche. It's real.
It's absolutely real. I think that the more you tune yourself to certain emotional states like joy and appreciation and love, then you become this receiver, and you can now so easily find it and see it and allow it into your life. Yeah. And whereas before, like I see it, I do a bit of life coaching as well. I call it joy and success coaching, and I just offer a perspective about alternative perspectives and modalities for people to be able to find be able to really improve their self-talk. Because I really believe that everything boils down to what's going on up between your ears. If what's going on between your ears is some bad self-talk, then you're in for it. Yeah. It's like, that's the director, right? You want to
I'm speaking your language. He asked me the question. I was already speaking your language. I didn't even know it. But, those things are so true. Mm-hmm. So true. So, I'm just trying to practice a lot more of that. And it's been very rewarding for me the last, couple of years.
I think it must feel really wonderful to have the kind of career you've had so far, to be able to be at the place you are. Because this is how I feel, too. I feel this energy from you, that you're at this place. It's not that you're at your final destinations or anything like that. It's that no matter what destination you're at, you've found a way to truly appreciate the elements of your life in meaningful ways that just bring value, that you can see the value so evidently. And it's easier for me, it's like, at least for me, it's easier for me to talk to my daughter. My daughter's 10. She's going to turn 10 this summer. And I just love being a dad. That's my favorite. I tell people, like, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it. I have a big sword on the wall. It's a trophy from a contest. I got 50 something shows I've done, 40 and 50 awards and trophies. And my favorite title I've ever been bestowed upon me was Daddy.
Yeah.
The best. It's the best. And every time I hear her ask me a question, all I have to do is, I said, just ask me anything you want. And every time she says Daddy, it just melts my heart. It's like, I'm like, yes, what is it?
I agree with you. Absolutely. I think a lot of, for me, it came from defining what my goals are in my life. And I don't mean just having them. I mean really defining them as to what's important to me and where do I want to be down the road. And everything I do is working towards those goals. And when I became a dad or a daddy, I defined everything I do is going to be about these girls. I waited till I was in my mid-40s before I had kids. I was 46 when I had my first. And, it's like I've enjoyed my life. I've done everything I could do. I've traveled. I've done all these fantastic things. My life is now dedicated to my wife and kids. And because of that, I have crystal clarity on where I want to be down the road. So everything I do is towards that, right? And what you realize when you start really defining what your goals are is that oftentimes you're chasing something that you might not ever obtain or need. And the best example I can give is, I think we inherently think in our minds, I'm going to retire, but I need millions of dollars in the bank to retire. The reality is you don't. If you have a simple lifestyle, and you're making a middle income, you could probably retire on a lot less and not be chasing those millions of dollars you think you need and working those 12 to 14 hours a day because you think you need the millions. Right? Instead, find out what your true goal is and what that balance is and work those hours and allow yourself to enjoy the other remaining hours for your family and appreciating the things that you've set out to appreciate. So it's really been a great exercise for me.
Actually, I never thought about it that way. I actually, as you were talking, since I was a kid, I set goals, right? Since I was like 13, I started writing down goals and trying to figure out how to get there, drawing roadmaps and stuff, and I was very successful at it from 13 till about my early 30s, like 31, 32. And of all those years, I used to keep a matrices of all the goals I set, all the ones I accomplished, all the ones I did. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood, like, I'm hitting these ones I'm not, like, right? And so by the time I was 31, 32, I had about a 97% hit rate on my goal success. So every year I would set goals, 97% of those I could achieve. But when I got to about 32, I really was disenchanted with this goal setting. So I'd love to hear your 2 cents on this, because I think I kind of can guess what you might say, but I want to hear it because you have a good perspective on goals. And I gave up writing down goals. And the reason why, here's my rationale, was because, and I'm not saying it's good for everybody, it was just me at the time. And every time I was at a frustrated point in my life. I was sort of a pre-midlife crisis. And I'm like, had this job, I was making 7 figures. And I was like, man, I was very successful in the technology space. I was still bodybuilding. I was still helping coaching people, but it wasn't my full-time vocation. And so I was really living sort of a dual life in some ways. But I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. The more money I made, I was more miserable. And it was all based on these goals I was setting. And I was like, man, so I decided, like, man, every time I set a goal, I looked back and it was like the next year I just bumped that goal up. I just kept raising the bar, and like there's no end to it. And I was waiting to like hit something to where I'd feel really good, right? Like, oh yeah, if I hit that, man, get that one car, that one house, I'm gonna feel awesome. It's gonna be great, success. Never came. It just setting one goal made it possible for me to up it for the next year. Well, on some level that's good. But the way that I was approaching my goals was, I can't be happy until I get this. I can't be happy. And I think that was my mistake, or that was part of my learning curve. But how have you approached that? Because the reason why I stopped setting those goals or writing them down was because it made me have it increased my desire for all these things. And I felt like it was very negative. It wasn't the kind of desire that makes you excited. It was the kind of desire that's like, oh man, fuck. And when am I going to be able to when am I going to be able to rest and like be happy with where I'm at? And it makes me reflect on one of my favorite writers, Eckhart Tolle. And he's just being very mindful of where you're at right now, this being in your now. And I'm big on mindfulness. I have these practices when I coach anybody. I have them meditate because I firmly believe you don't have a control of your mind, you can't control your body. So how would you negotiate that? How would you negotiate this idea that goals can actually set you up to really want more and more and more in an unhealthy way that creates that imbalance?
Yeah, well, I would guarantee you if you were goal setting today, right after this show, that your goals would be different now than they were back when you were doing the goals that you just described. Because what you were describing is a materialistic goal.
That's right.
And as we mature, we learn that the materialistic things in our life don't satisfy, right? They're temporary fixes.
You need more.
You need more. It's like I talked about earlier, that obtainable luxury, that martini that's $15, but it's Kettle One or Grey Goose, and you're like, oh, I feel fantastic. The next day you're going to feel broke again. Truly broke. So having materialistic goals is one thing, and I think that there's some value in achieving some things in your life that make you feel good, whether it's that nice car or that house. But when I talk about goal setting, I talk about real life, meaningful goals, right? So for me, I talk about my kids, right? So the most meaningful goal that I could have is time with my kids, right? We talk about in today's society how time is worth more than money because none of us have enough time anymore with technology and everything else, right? So for me, my goal is, how can I set myself up in a place and have the goal of more time with my daughters, right? So what does that look like? And you work backwards from there. So for me, that looks like working from home. Okay, so how do I find a career or a job that I can work from home and get my girls up in the morning, take them to school, go back home and work in my office at home, then go pick them up after school and I get them, I get to see them again, right? And it allows me to work in different times of the day in different segments so I can enjoy my life with my girls, right? So that's kind of was my working goal, short term. My long-term goal, of course, is not to work at all. But to make that a meaningful goal, what does my life look like in the future that allows me to have more time with my girls, right? Is it that, 10,000 square foot house in Newport Beach? Hell no. I'd be working the rest of my life to be able to try to afford that. And I might miss out on the most important times of my daughter's lives as they're growing up to achieve that goal. So for me, and I'm happy to share it with your listeners and you, I thought, look, if I love the country and the mountains. So I thought, if I bought a house in Montana, and you can buy a big house for $600,000 in Montana, which by the way is less than the house I live in now. I thought, okay, so I buy a retirement home in Montana, and it's less cost of living than I'm in now. That allows me to budget what that would look like down the road. So, so then I just started drilling back, like, okay, so if I was making 10 or 20 grand a month and I was able to put away this much, by the time I was retired in 5 years, I can afford that house in Montana and not have to work at all. Right? So I just worked the numbers because, again, the most important part of my goal was more time with my girls, right? My wife and my 2 daughters. And it wasn't about something materialistic that was maybe too unobtainable for me at this point in my life, or I wasn't willing to sacrifice the time to chase those dollars to have that house on the beach. Because at the end of the day, that's not really what I want.
Right.
Girls, right? I really could do that anywhere. So it's understanding what that long-term satisfaction is, or that achievement in life, and focusing on that instead of the short-term materialistic things. And by the way, it's not to say you don't want to, it's always nice to get a few things that satisfy you, that immediate satisfaction,
Sure.
So I'm saying people should deprive themselves of some of those neat things, but be realistic about what you really want and how to get it.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're right. I was definitely, when I scanned back, most of my goals were very materialistic, but I think the reason why was because since the age of 13, I grew up very poor. Like, my mother she made $550 a month for the majority of my childhood. And so it wasn't a lot, but it was good, it was enough. And so I think I always had this awareness of of a lack of, like, I want this, we don't have this, I want this. Even though I didn't have a bad childhood, I had a wonderful childhood. So I'm glad you said it like that, because it made a lot of sense to me. So because if I was to restructure my goals, it made me think, well, how would I set this today? Like, if I was to actually sit down, like you said, and write down a few goals, they're all based on emotions.
And we learn that with maturity, but if we can learn that at a younger age, right? What's really important in life. If we listen to our parents and our grandparents and the things that they advise us on, there's probably a lot of nuggets in there that if we paid better attention, we wouldn't be chasing superficial or short-term satisfaction things. We would understand, gosh, like my grandpa taught me when I was 18, put $50 away a month, automatic out of your checking account into a fund, a mutual fund, right? So you start doing that, 10 years down the road, it's like, wow, that's $500,000. 20 years down the road, wow, I got a couple $1,000,000. All because you had the discipline of putting $50 in there a month for 20, 30 years as it compounds, right? It's little things like that we understand, or we can understand, that have tremendous value when you get older.
You just described the rationale for training, having a good diet, and eating and taking your vitamins. Right? The small investments we make today don't always show us in the mirror, but they absolutely reflect down the road. So I like that. Because when I went to high school, I think we had a personal finance class we had to take, and it was kind of funny. And I knew the guy, and he said, "Oh yeah, put $100 away a month," and he did this math, and he showed you, and I was like, "Wow, that was pretty fascinating." It reminds me of I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there's the marshmallow test. I've talked about it before. Psychologists have this thing called the marshmallow test. Yeah. They were trying to figure out about kids, and they would offer a marshmallow to a child, and I think this is sort of indicative of everybody that I've ever worked with. They fall into one of these two camps. They fall into the camp that's they offer. So the experiment was this: they got a group of children together of various ages and different backgrounds, and they offered them a marshmallow. One marshmallow said, "I'll give you this marshmallow right now, but if you're willing to wait an hour, I'll give you 2 marshmallows." And some of them wanted their marshmallow right now. Others would say, "Oh wow, I'll wait an hour if I get 2." I'm like, "Okay, I'll wait." So, and the psychologist saying, "Look, this is how people get grouped." And we tracked those same kids years later, they exhibited the same qualities throughout their life. And what they had was they wanted instant gratification.
Yeah.
And a lot of it had to do with inner city kids. They just when something's available, you get it because it's going to be gone. Like, it's a very different, it's how they grow up. It's what the messages they're telling themselves. The kids who chose to, they're the ones who are willing to save and look for, they said on average, they were just more successful. They went to college. They were able to see beyond the instant gratification of the now. Beyond that, they planned for something. So, I could get more if I wait. So I always see it reminds me a lot of that. This kind of stuff reminds me a lot of that, because that's the way I kind of see when you talk about making deposit, sort of these investments now. It's really a lot like the marshmallow test. Like, either you buy into this idea that small investments today will yield bigger results tomorrow, or waiting today, or not getting something immediately right now can actually be so much greater for your life later. Then that is a very different. I just don't know if everybody really has that mentality. They have the ability to have it. I just don't know if everybody really has it. They're not willing, so.
I asked my 95-year-old grandfather a couple weeks ago, I said, hey, what advice would you give anybody, right? And it's a cliche, but at the same time, it's so true. Love what you do, right?
Absolutely.
And working in life, love what you do. That's coming from a 95-year-old. He does, do you have any regrets? He says, nope, just love what you do. And, if we can remember that in all things, I think we're in a better place. Because so often we chase the money because we think that's what we have to be doing, or we're in a job that we think our parents want us to be in, or society tells us to be in, and we're not doing what we love. And if you love what you do, as they say, you never work a day in your life if you love what you do. And, there's so much truth to that. And understanding those emotional satisfactions early on in life set you up much better for when you're older. And like you talked about, your goals, you were constantly chasing the next, and you were never satisfied with it. It's a perfect example of why those are the wrong types of goals to be setting, because you can never have enough, right?
Never.
But if you genuinely looked inside and what was important, I guarantee your 10-year-old would be on the top of your list, right?
Well, that was these days. Like I was like you. My daughter was born when I was almost 40. She was 39, I think. I was 40. And so so when I was setting goals in my teens and my 20s and my 30s, she was not around, but absolutely. Today, on the top of my list today are really, all the goals center around maximizing the joy and the love in my life, because it's just, to me, love and joy and excitement is the real currency of this life. Yeah. You can never feel like you have enough of it. And two, if you don't have it, boy, does it matter what you live, where you live, who you live with, you do not feel like this is a good experience.
Yeah, no, it's so true. True.
Well, I'm Jim. I want to thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me and to talk about some of your history and some of these really cool. I really am intrigued about the orphanages in Baja. I really kind of want to, if there's maybe you could send me some information so that people could, if they want to donate or they want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would totally, I think that's a really neat thing. And children have a soft spot in my heart, obviously, because we're dads, but especially ones that don't have the same opportunities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if we can offer that to others, look, it doesn't have to be fancy. Baja United Wines, any wine you buy, we're going to send support to the orphanages through that. And by the way, you get to enjoy the wine.
Yeah. There we go. Cool.
It's bad. Let's not overcomplicate it, right?
Awesome.
So when I get off the air, I'm going to make myself a concoction of my GQ6 hydration mix with MCT oils. Okay. And then maybe I'm put a little CBD in there.
Okay. Perfect. Just be careful. Like, one side note about MCT oil. If you drink a lot, if you ingest a lot of it, and some people, their systems don't like it very much. So they get the runs. But so just start off slow, start maybe like a half a tablespoon, start there, and then work your way up to a tablespoon if you want.
Well, around this farm, I've heard the term, you can always smoke more, but you can never smoke less.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. Where can people find you if they want to find you and look at some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, but I would love to have them follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Jim Riley Racing, Jim Riley Racing. I have a Spartan site called Spartan Strong at 50, for the older people out there if you want to check that out. And then, like I mentioned earlier, thank you for asking, by the way, my website is Live Life Driven, and that'll be launching in about a week. I'm actually going to be doing a podcast with David Meltzer. He's going to push out on his stuff to launch my website, and he's got a book coming out. So we're doing that in collaboration. I'm really excited about it. He's such a great guy. So thank you for asking and having me on your show today.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I love meeting really cool people, and anybody that David knows, usually they're pretty cool people. So.
True story. Vice versa, man. You've been awesome.
All right, my friend. Well, you hang on for just a quick second before I stop recording. But thank you so much again, and I will talk to you soon. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Handle your high with Tadayoshi.